Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, done by Srila Prabhupada. We are on chapter 26, Bhattacharya is converted. For the impersonalists and void philosophers, the next world is senseless, eternity, and bliss. The void philosophers want to establish that ultimately everything is senseless, and the impersonalists want to establish that the next world is simply knowledge without any activities. In other words, less intelligent Salvinist wants to carry imperfect knowledge into the perfect sphere of spiritual activity. The impersonalists, having experienced a great disadvantage in material activity, want to establish spiritual life without activity. He cannot understand the activities of devotional service. Spiritual activity in devotional service is not eligible to the void philosophers and impersonalists. The Vaishnava philosophers know perfectly well that the absolute truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, having the power of innumerable potencies, can never be impersonal or void. He can present himself in multiple forms with innumerable energies, and still he remains himself as the absolute Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is competent himself to maintain his transcendental position in spite of his becoming expanded in multiple forms and diffused by his innumerable multiple forms of energy. Thus, Lord Chaitanya showed many defects in the Mayavadi philosophy. And although Bhattacharya wanted to establish himself with various juggleries of world and logic, Lord Chaitanya was able to maintain himself from such attacks. And he established that the Vedic literature is meant for three things: to understand a relationship with the Absolute Supreme Personality of Godhead, to act according to that understanding, and at the end, to achieve the highest perfection of life, love of Godhead. Anybody who wants to prove something other than the above mentioned three purposes must be the victim of his own imagination. The Lord then quoted some verses from the Puranas by which he wanted to establish that Shankaracharya was meant to do his teaching by the supreme order of the personality of Godhead. He quoted a verse from Padma Purana in which it stated that the Lord ordered Mahadev Lord Shiva to present some imaginary interpretation of the Vedic literature and thus try to distract persons from the actual position of the Veda. By such activity, you try to make them atheists, and after that, they can be engaged in producing more population. In the same Padma Purana, it is also said that Shiva explained to his wife Parvati that in the age of the Kali, in the form of a Brahmana, he would preach the imperfect explanation of the Veda, known as Mayavadi, which is actually a second edition of the atheist philosophy of Buddha. By such explanation of Lord Chaitanya, Bhattacharya was overwhelmed. And hearing the explanation of Mayavadi philosophy from Lord Chaitanya, he could not speak and simply remained silent for some time. Lord Chaitanya asked him, "My dear Bhattacharya, don't be hampered with this explanation. Please take it from me that the devotional service of the Supreme Lord is the highest perfectional stage of human understanding. Devotional service of the Lord is so attractive that even persons who are already liberated become devotees of the Lord by the inconceivable potency of the Supreme Personality of God. There are many instances of this in the Vedic literature, such as in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st canto, 7th chapter. There is in the famous Atmarama verse for persons who are attached to self-realization and liberated from all material attachment. Such liberated impersonally sages become attracted by devotional service by the various activities of Lord Krishna. This is the transcendental quality of the Supreme Personality of the Godhead. Actually, the pure consciousness of the living entity is to understand himself as the servant of the Supreme Lord. Under the spell of illusion, a less intelligent person accepts the gross body and subtle body as his self. Such a conception is the basis of the doctrine of transference. Actually, the part and parcel of the Supreme is not subjected eternally to such a false conception of gross and subtle bodily life. The covering of the living entity by the gross and subtle body is not his eternal form, but can be engaged, or the living entity can become free from such existence. While he is in the conception of the body and mind, he is certainly transferred his position from spirit to matter. Mayavadi philosophers, of course, take advantage of this doctrine of transference. They say that the living entity, under the wrong impression, thinks himself as part and parcel, but he is the supreme himself. This doctrine cannot be tenable. Okay, so I'll stop here. So basically, this is the conversation between Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. As we remember, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was going on explaining the Vedanta philosophy to Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya just sat there, listened to the whole thing. He never spoke anything. And then Lord and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was like, "Are you understanding what I'm trying to teach you? Because you're not saying anything." And that's when he says that I have understood the Vedas, and that is not what you're trying to teach here, right? He clearly says that actually the meaning of the Vedas is different, but you have completely changed the meaning of the Vedas. So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was completely shocked when he heard that. And that's when then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu started speaking. And then the way he explained the Atmarama verse, how many times I forget, but yeah, he's explained it several different types of the meanings. And then Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was completely taken back that he could explain it so beautifully, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And in today's verse reading, also, we are seeing, today's explanation, also, we are seeing that he's clearly trying to explain how Mayavadi philosophy is not right, because when somebody is so engaged, spiritual life is completely engagement. All along we are engaged. So then, see, in bhakti process, here's the thing, right? Our goal and our process is the same. Our goal is bhakti, pure bhakti, and we are also following bhakti. The process to get to the goal is the same, and the goal is the same. But what happens in Mayavadi philosophy is that they are doing all of this, but however, the goal is finally merging into the Supreme Lord, merging into Brahman. So they are completely losing their existence. Their goal is salvation, liberation, like completely non-existence of their own self. So that goal is different from the process, what they are doing. So that's the clear distinction between Mayavadi philosophy versus the Bhakti path. And that is what Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is explaining, that how could somebody who's been following a bhakti path and all of that just go into nothingness? That is really hard to even understand. How can that even happen? And also the explanation is given in the Vedas, where those who have been in that stage of liberated stage have also been converted into bhaktas. Example, we know that Sukadev Goswami was at that stage. But when he heard Srimad Bhagavatam, he developed so much love, that intense desire to please the Lord, and he became completely a devotee. Like, he developed the prema bhakti. So that's the power of bhakti process, that even the people who are liberated, so this is like almost like a step up. Even after people become liberated, this is the next step in order to get to the bhakti platform. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is clearly explaining that even the goal is really to understand the relationship, the Sambandha Abhideya Prayojana, understanding the relationship, serving in that relationship, and then ultimately the goal of Prema Bhakti. So also it was explained about how Lord Shiva, also he said that he is going to come as his incarnation and kind of, like, I guess, confuse the people around the Mayavadi philosophy. And that's what happened when he came as Shankaracharya. And then he kind of did that impersonal philosophy. But Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came, and then he was trying to explain to everybody that there is a goal higher than all of this, and that is Prema Bhakti. And as followers of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in this disciplic succession, This is the path that we all have been encouraged to take in order to get to, from sadhana bhakti, ultimately get to that level where we develop that intense desire to love